Representative Paul Ryan weighed in on the Baltimore situation, and he used it to slam welfare.
And so what I thought was, after a 50-year war on poverty and trillions of dollars spent, we still have the same poverty rates. We have 45 million people in poverty. So I think what we as a country, this isn't a Republican-Democrat thing, it's we as a country need to say, that's not good enough. We're not getting the results we need. What do we do to get the results? And I think the best thing we can do is go listen to people who are fighting poverty right now, and especially those who are overcoming it.
What can the federal government do?
What the federal government's good at doing is providing resources. What the federal government is bad at doing is dictating solutions. And so what we have done at the federal government is we have measured success based on effort, input. How much money are we spending? How many programs are we creating? How many people are on the programs? Rather than measuring success based on results, outcomes. How many people are we actually getting off of poverty? And what I think the federal government has done is displaced local problem solving with top-down, one-size-fits-all, and it's not working. And so we need to go to an outcome-based approach and rework our poverty-fighting strategy, overhaul our poverty-fighting strategies to be focused on results and outcomes. And that means listening to people on the ground fighting poverty, not telling them how to overcome it.
Does it also mean the federal government needs to make more money available?
It's really not a more money thing. It's spend the money we have more effectively. So I think we need to do another round of welfare reform, not to save money, but to save lives. And so it's not a function of pumping more money into the same failed system because we'll just get the same failed result. It's rethinking how we actually attack the root causes of poverty. All we do these days effectively is treat the symptoms of poverty. Why don't we figure out how to go at the root causes of poverty?
What would be one thing you would do to attack the root causes?
Well, I would consolidate many of our federal poverty programs into flexible programs to go to our states to customize a welfare benefit for a person's particular need. Because what you do when you stack up all these poverty programs on top of each other, we had this thing called a poverty trap, where we're actually disincentivizing a person from getting on with their life and going to work. It pays not to take that risk to take a job to go help improve your life because of the benefits you lose.
And why, in this hypothetical scenario, would it pay more to not get a job? Could it be because, oh, I don't know, the minimum wage isn't a living wage? So maybe you attack the problem that way. Maybe you attack the problem from the other angle, from the angle of you incentivize people to get jobs because a job would pay more and pay better than any government safety net program would. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to attack the problem from the minimum wage angle. He doesn't want to make the wages better. He just wants to cut the safety net and make it so that you're really, really struggling if you're unemployed. And even if you're employed, you're still going to struggle because a minimum wage isn't a living wage, and he's totally fine with that. Understand that whenever Republicans talk about the safety net, they're being disingenuous. Every time you hear the word reform, every time you hear them talk about reform or consolidate the programs, what they're really saying is cut. Again, you see this with Social Security, for example. Every time they talk about, we need to reform Social Security, we need to reform it now. What does that mean? They mean privatize it, as George W. Bush already tried to do. And when you privatize it, what happens? You're, in effect, cutting it. You're taking it from a social insurance program and changing it to, hey, give all the money to our buddies on Wall Street, let them take a cut, and then pay out less money. If we privatized Social Security when they wanted to in 2004, when 2008 happened in the Great Recession, everybody would have been screwed. Nobody would have had any retirement money because it would have went poof in the marketplace. But that's what they're talking about. When they say reform or consolidate, it means cut, and privatize. That's what he means. And also, to this notion that's so pervasive on the right, from virtually every conservative, when they talk about the war on poverty hasn't worked, the war on poverty hasn't worked, the war on poverty hasn't worked, they now just say it as a reflexive thing. Next time you hear somebody say that, press them on it. Say, really? Name me one statistic that shows that it hasn't worked. They're not going to be able to tell you anything because they just believe it as like a definitional thing. The government, by definition, can't help with poverty because I say so, so therefore the war on poverty hasn't worked because I say so. Just press them on it even a little bit, Just leave it open-ended. Give me one statistic that shows the war on poverty hasn't worked. They won't be able to tell you Because it has worked. All the evidence says that. And we spoke about this recently, but I'll go through it again because it's very important. Here's just one example. When it comes to Social Security, how many people has that kept out of poverty? 26.6 million. Tell me again how the war on poverty and social safety net programs don't work. Refundable tax credits, 9.4 million people kept out of poverty. SNAP, which is the food stamp program, 5 million people kept out of poverty because of food stamps. Supplemental security income, 3.3 million kept out of poverty. Housing subsidies, 2.8 million people kept out of poverty. Unemployment, 2.4 million people kept out of poverty. We have child support, 1.3 million people kept out of poverty. School lunch programs, 1.2 million people. Public assistance, 641,000 people. The WIC program, 397,000 people kept out of poverty. Workers' compensation, 320,000 people kept out of poverty. Low-income home energy assistance program, 260,000 people kept out of poverty. Did you know that overall, as a result of FDR's social safety net programs and Lyndon B. Johnson's war on poverty and social safety net programs, the unemployment rate now, according to one measure, is 15%. I'm sorry, not the unemployment. Check that. Not unemployment. The poverty rate is 15%. What would it be if we didn't have any of Lyndon B. Johnson's programs or any of FDR's programs? 30%. It would be double. You can't say it hasn't worked. It objectively has worked. The only argument that really makes sense is we need to do more of that stuff. We need to have a better social safety net. We need to catch up with the rest of the modern industrialized world with the kinds of safety nets that they have. I mean, another example is senior citizen poverty. That was above 30% before we had Social Security. What's it now? About 10%. You can't, there's no substitute for having a good social safety net. By virtue of the way, or I should say, by the nature of the way that a capitalist system functions, you're going to have tremendous inequality, and an inequality that's not sustainable. The only way to address that problem and redress the grievances here is to set up a good safety net, which makes it so that the bottom isn't nearly as low as it would be if there were no government there. That's the only way to fix this problem. But Paul Ryan's solution is just more of the problem. Consolidate the programs, reform the programs, aka cut them and screw these people over more.